don't worry, we have jam-packed content coming up, including David Brin. There is an intimate, symbiotic relationship between science fiction and science fact, something our next speaker knows a lot about. David Brin is a scientist and award-winning author. His 1989 ecological thriller, Earth, foreshadowed global warming, cyber warfare, and near-future trends such as the World Wide Web. And his nonfiction book, The Transparent Society Will Technology Force Us to Choose Between Freedom and Privacy, deals with secrecy in the modern world. Brin's scientific work covers an eclectic range of topics from astronauts, astronomy, and optics to alternative dispute resolution and the role of neoteny in human evolution. And he holds patents which directly confront some of the faults of old-fashioned screen-based interaction, aiming to improve the way human beings converse online. As a sought-after scientist and futurist, he is the perfect person to help us see 40 years into the future with AR. Please join me in welcoming David Brin to the stage. Thank you.
Howdy, and thanks for inviting me to this awesome conference. It's an amazing time to be in, and as Tom Furness said, sometimes these things go in cycles. I recall the first time I saw a little thing called HyperCard on the old Macintosh. And it used this clickable hypertext thing. And I said, this is where things are going to go. And it was ridiculed left and right. And there was that gap when ridicule made something obvious go away. And the same thing happened with regard to AR. And now we're on the other side of this gap when everybody's declaring, oh, it was obvious all along that humans would want this. Just as it was obvious all along that people would want clickable to be able to click on their screens. Well, in any event, let's see how we're doing here. Oh, I see. It's all over there. Oh, Augie!
Hi, how are you?
How you doing, man?
Well, thanks for letting me to jump in like this. I was just sitting back and getting comfortable again. So first of all, thanks for saying that you'd agreed to do a reading. It's nice of you to let me. Are you ready to reach out to an old device very quickly? See if we can make some contact.
Absolutely.
Oh,
They've all been
so
instructed to wait to hear from you.
Oh, thank you so much. Okay, well, in which case, I'll ask you to close your eyes and take a deep breath. That's it. Let the oxygen hit your blood. That's it. That's it. Find a still place in your mind. Oh. Yeah, the signals I listen for as weak as brainwaves and as strong as your will. And just like that, I've got something. Now open your eyes. Yeah, it's an old device. It's an old device, and it's speaking a funny language. It's an old language. It's like modernist poetry. It's strange, but it's saying to you that you're translated into a lot more languages now. So that's just as well. You know what it is? It's basic. It's basic. It says this device was lost or stolen. Does that make any sense?
Well, the device that's in my pocket, as people can see here, is very old. Guy who talks about the smart tech future has a non-smartphone for certain reasons. But yes, I did have an article about why BASIC disappeared from our computers and why our kids don't have programming languages on any of their computers anymore. It's called Why Johnny Can't Code.
That's right. I think I'm talking to your Apple II.
Yeah. I once had an Apple II with a serial number in 5 digits.
Wow. Well, it's got a little program. It's just very, very quickly. It says 10, clear screen, 20, do loop until read, 30, print, 40, now press return. Does that make any sense?
You are indeed the augmentalist.
Then I shall leave you to it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let's hear it for Augie. All right, well, he's the perfect intro for the augmented future and what will we see in 40 years. And the job of the science fiction author is to probe ahead, but not necessarily predict, but rather to warn about the bad and offer options for the good. And the greatest of the warnings, of course, become the greatest of the science fiction stories called self-preventing prophecies. And the greatest of those, of course, is 1984 by George Orwell, but also Silent Springs, Soylent Green, Dr. Strangelove, all scary science fiction stories that helped prevent themselves from coming true. And there's an awful lot to prevent. There's an awful lot to fix. There's world hunger. There's decaying infrastructure that is being ignored by our politics. There is the spreading of deserts and other problems with our climate. There's the world floating in garbage. And the perennial problem of tyranny, where human beings keep trying to recreate the old pyramid of power that we'll get to. And of course, just living on this planet. And if these problems aren't solved, the problem of overreach revolution, which the moderate revolution is supposed to prevent. And then there's stuff that might fall on us. They say that the biggest problem, the reason there are no dinosaurs anymore is because they didn't have a space program. So, with all that to do, what are we going to do? Can technology make a difference? Well, one of the things that we've been talking about is the business of valence, as Steve Mann talked about. And that is omnivalence, surveillance. How do you answer surveillance, the world that we were warned about in 1984? For 25 years, I've been saying, in my nonfiction book, The Transparent Society, and way back in 1989 in the novel Earth, I've been saying, we're screaming about the wrong thing. You will never prevent elites from looking at you. Any attempt to try to hide from elites using encryption or laws to prevent them from seeing is just delusion. The thing to do is to maintain our freedom the way we got our freedom, and that is by looking back, by insisting on supervision. And you'll see a title of my book about that in a little bit. But the question is, it's not a question of whether Big Brother is watching you. He will one way or another. The question is, can we watch Big Brother enough to render him harmless? And an example of this is that the news media completely ignored the most important civil liberties decision in the last 30 years of American history. 2013 was the best year for civil liberties in America in 30 years, and it was completely ignored when the Obama administration joined the courts in declaring a universal and absolute citizen right to record their interactions in public with the police. An absolutely crucial moment in American history that was utterly ignored. But we tend to ignore the future. We have on our foreheads, just above the eyes, these prefrontal lobes, the last organ that we ever evolved. And it's what separates us to some degree from animals, even chimps. These prefrontal lobes are the lamps on the brow, as the Bible says about Moses' ability to look ahead. They're what allow us to contemplate the possibility that things might be different than they are. That you might be someone else, and imagine yourself walking a mile in her shoes. This is the seat of empathy, but it is also the seat of what Einstein called the Gedanken experiment, the thought experiment. What if I raise this possibility at the meeting? What if I spend the next 6 months inventing this? What if I try to run this yellow light? And a number of our people in our protector cast back east invite science fiction authors east every year to help them to develop their prefrontal abilities to anticipate dangers. And that's what anticipation is all about, using these prefrontal lobes. And anticipation inevitably fails, as it did on 9/11, when not one action taken by the professional protector caste worked. But the other thing did work on 9/11, and that was citizens being resilient. And I recommend Rebecca Solnit's book, Paradise Made in Hell, in which she proves that Hollywood utterly betrays us by portraying our fellow citizens as always panicking in emergencies, when in fact, given the slightest empowerment, that's the opposite of what citizens do. Citizens are extremely reliable to try to do the right thing. They only need two things: a sense of empowerment and their children are safe. And then citizens step up, and it's called resilience. So how can we empower this? Now I violate every rule deliberately. You should see what I do in my novels to Joseph Campbell's notions of how a story arc is supposed to go. And this slide breaks every rule because it's filled with stuff, but you can find it online. 400 years ago, we developed glass lenses and movable type and perspective, and these caused crises. And ever since then, every generation of humans in Western civilization and world civilization has dealt with expansions of what we can see, what we can know, what we can pay attention to, and what we can reach. And the result has been crises every single time. The discovery of the printing press, well, there were transcendentalists at that time who said this is going to change everything and make everything better. People are going to become more than they were. They're going to know more. Their empathy will be expanded. And Grouch has always said human beings cannot deal with this kind of fire hose of new information. It must be mediated and controlled by an elite. And always in the short term, it was the Grouches who were right. The printing press initially was used to spread horrible religious tracts that exacerbated the religious wars of Europe. And it was only after a while when people got used to it and then there was enough printing that some people started seeing both sides of the issues and started expanding their ability to be what the transcendentalists and the optimists thought they would be with this new access to information. And this happened every generation since then with mass literacy and printed illustrations, which expanded empathy with people elsewhere. Mass education, photography, cinemas, computing, television, abstraction, and finally our knowledge mesh, which is gradually replacing the internet. And I have some papers about why the internet has not joined some of our more mature methods, like markets and science and democracy, at solving problems. And the problems with the internet are immense because it has proved to be incapable at killing bad ideas. It only spreads them more. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad thing to enable us to have access to more thoughts, but it's definitely true that the Grouches are proving right first. And America's current civil war is more exacerbated by the internet than it is being solved by it. And the question is, will we grow wise? Well, if history shows any example, then we will. In the 1930s, radios and loudspeakers appeared to vastly amplify to godlike proportions the polemical power of gifted ranters. All over the world, they took over. And it was only in the English-speaking world that it happened that our gifted polemicists, masters of radio and loudspeakers, happened to be on our side. Or maybe that was our choice. We chose the ones that were on our side. But after a while, radio and television became part of the suite that we used to solve problems and increase empathy and decrease the violence of our interactions on planet Earth. So always godlike expansions of vision, knowledge, attention, and reach lead to fear of hubris and self-destruction, the Grouches I mentioned, and call for an enunciation by a trusted elite. And yet, despite painful adjustment, we never refuse the new tools and prosthetics. Always these godlike powers become the new norm. And now we're no longer drinking from a fire hose. Now it's a tsunami of information and knowledge. And there are those who say we must stand athwart history with our hands out and yell, stop. Does anybody at all in this audience know who I'm referring to? Well, all right, it was William F. Buckley who said that. But the point is, and God, I miss him. I miss that kind of conservative. Never thought I would, but yes. The point is, though, that we could either face the tsunami with our hand out, or we can learn to surf. And I know what all of you believe. So, we see one of your speakers from just 10 minutes ago here, my dear friend Steve Mann. And we see a fellow who mercifully allows me to show up on the first page of Google searches under the word Brin. It is pure mercy by which he does that. And we see a character in the lower right-hand corner named Tor Pavlov from my most recent novel, Existence. And you can see her in action in a 3-minute video trailer to Existence that's on my website, davidbrin.com. But this character is attending a conference very much like this conference, only 30 years from now. And so she's wandering the halls with augmented reality overlaid upon everything that she sees. And she's using it not just to see overlays, but to navigate the multi-layers of augmented reality. And this is one of the things that I think a lot of you don't get. I portray it in Existence, and Werner Vinge also portrays it in his great novel, Rainbow's End, and that is that it will be a navigable realm of reality in which you will scroll your way through a vast space. Think IPv6 of web pages, a vast space of overlays upon the world, some of which may have been made by amateurs. Some local kid may have overlaid the city with vines and dinosaurs sticking over their heads over. And all of this will be available to you. You know, everyone walking around might be stripped naked with giant mustaches that trail behind them. Anything that doesn't violate the law, that things you might collide with, have to be outlined in collision avoidance yellow. You'll learn about that. You're about to enter the world of lawyers. This is why Google Glass was offset from the central point of view. Those of you who want to overlay reality with information, get good lawyers for the next 10 years, for when somebody wearing your gear steps in front of a car. In any event, we're already enhancing ourselves. This same process of overlays and overlays and overlays. There you see Tor on the left, on a street scene in San Diego in the near future. And all but a few of the people are wearing augmented eyewear because they've gotten past the decade of the lawyers and it's all worked out. And so they're on their way all across their world. And what are we doing? We're going to be getting rid of the prosthetics that are in your wallet. Prosthetics for reputation. It used to be you would only need to know 5,000 people in the course of your life. And so you would know the most gregarious person in your village would go to the local little town, and you would know the blacksmith, and you'd say, I need 4 horseshoes. I'll bring you 3 bushels of wheat next week. And he'd grunt and nod, or you'd shake hands, and you'd walk away with 4 horseshoes. Can you do that now? No, that's why you have all these prosthetics in your pocket. Prosthetics for reputation. But when you are going down the street in a little Thai village and you enter a shop and they're selling walking sticks. Hey, some of them can even break into a run. And you tap your glasses, you click, your sister who owns a shop in Duluth looks at them, wants to order 20, the proprietor taps her goggles and gets the credit rating of your sister's store. You reach out, you shake hands, both eyeglasses have witnessed it, you walk away. No exchange of money, no exchange of credits, no exchange of anything, because it's a contract just like in the old village. And nothing more is needed. This is what you will get when this stuff fully matures, is you will get, well, you'll get a transparent society. There's my book. I don't know why I put it there. But that's one of the only public policy books from the 20th century, still in print, still selling more every year, and they want to do a 20th anniversary edition. Just get your hands on it just long enough to look at page 206 and get creeped out by a Twilight Zone moment. In any event, the village is returning. And nothing we do will prevent the village returning, because that's what human beings are naturally tuned to do, to be in a village. Only it'll be a village of 7 billion people, maybe 8, maybe 9. The question is, does anybody recognize the image on the right? That's from the village of the prisoner. Do we want to live in that village? Be seeing you. Do we want to live in that village? Do we want to live in any of the villages that our ancestors lived in? 90% of them were horrible. They were dominated by the lord on the hill on his castle and the thugs that he appointed to be police in your town, in your village. And worst of all, dominated and bullied by the local gossips. But we've developed immune systems to these failure modes. Does anybody recall a song by Gene C. Riley called Harper Valley PTA? That's how you respond to the local gossip. And if you are able to do that, and you're free to tell the Lord on the hill, who you elected and is only there temporarily, strip. And you're free to tell the thugs on the streets, no, you're not thugs anymore. You are police, and you are professionals, and you are watched. Then there's a possibility you may not get the village that our ancestors fled, that they feared, that they dreaded, but that our brains are equipped to be in. Instead, you get the village of Andy Hardy movies, in which people leave each other alone because it's in their own best interests to mind your own business, except when someone's in trouble. Everybody knows who's in trouble. And what did Judy Garland and Mickey Rooney do whenever anybody in town is in trouble? Hey, let's put on a show. The ideal village would be one of reciprocal accountability, in which we respect each other's privacy, not because of some illusion, some insane notion that you can actually conceal yourself behind veils of encryption or clouds of secrecy or laws saying don't look, but rather the reciprocal power that you have to know about them and therefore to be left alone for your harmless little eccentricities and peccadillos. Now we're seeing Moore's law taking off, and will it lead to us becoming transhuman? Will we build others from scratch? In other words, will the village get a topmost layer that's not human? Well, that's an interesting question. We certainly have a variety of images of what these particular beings might be like if they move around, or if they don't move around, but simply take over. And it's scary. I'm involved in a lot of discussions about AI, and it's scary to consider that the Terminator, Skynet, won't come from the military, because they're compulsive about having off switches. And they at least have traditions about restraint of power. No, where we're getting Skynet is from Goldman Sachs. Goldman Sachs spends more on artificial intelligence research than the top dozen universities. And that's just one Wall Street firm. And you know what they're doing. They're trying to develop systems that can get into the markets, flash trading, opportunistic trend spotting, and out-trade any human using algorithms. And the scary thing about this is that these methodologies are being developed in systems that are inherently and by design parasitical, predatory, amoral, and insatiable. And this is the fundamental ethos, not Asimov's 3 laws of robotics, which, by the way, I finished Asimov's universe for him. His wife kindly said it was the best non-Isaac Asimov book, called Foundation's Triumph. I tied up all his loose ends. Little plug there. But the point that you have the opposite ethos being developed in the places where AI is getting the most money poured into it. Exactly the ethos that would give us an amoral Terminator. And I, for one, welcome our Goldman Sachs computer overlords. And then there's the question of how we might enhance ourselves to keep up. This whole singularity thing, the whole notion that we might develop. And you'll see a lot of these images in Patrick Farley's wonderful, wonderful trailer for Existence. If you go to my website, you can play it. It's the best 3 minutes you'll have with your clothes on. But the whole notion that we might alter ourselves or alter other animals. How many of you know what I'm referring to? Another of my science fiction series, the Uplift universe, in which we have 200-300 years from now, we have altered species like dolphins and apes to become our equals. And there's your dolphin. So, I want to because I have just a little bit of time, I'm going to dive into this. I mentioned the pyramidal social structure. This is how we made decisions almost all of the periods of time since we developed agriculture, and it's basically you go do this. The alternative is a diamond-shaped social structure with a well-off and empowered middle class that's unafraid of the rich and outnumbers the poor, and that latter factor is hugely important because when you outnumber the poor, you've got them surrounded, and it means you can do something about poverty, and you can change the whole way in which things are done. And the problem-solving process in a pyramidal structure is you do this, and it inevitably leads to delusion and mistakes, and I just explained to you human history. Whereas the problem-solving method of the Enlightenment, and especially the diamond-shaped social structure, is complicated, and that's why people have so little patience for it right now, even though it is exactly what got us all the miracles that we have. And it's called negotiation. If I can leave you with anything to look up, it's not my books and all the blather and all the things that I've touted. It's the notion of the zero-sum game versus the positive-sum game. If you do not have a thorough understanding of the positive-sum game, then you do not understand the fundamental quandary of our era, and it has nothing to do with the stupid, hoary, lobotomizing left-right political axis that we should abandon not only because it's meaningless, none of you could define it if your life depended upon it. And feel shame that you define yourself by such an insipid and stupid metaphor. But we should abandon it if for no other reason because it's French. No, this is the fight. It's the fight between zero-sum games and positive-sum thinking. And you look it up. You understand it or you don't understand anything. So is it still working? Obviously not. We'll leave you with Douglas Adams speaking here. This is, I think, an important wise man of whom we were deprived. Well, why don't we negotiate anymore? Baby boomers. You youngsters will be so much better off when we're gone because our generational talent is self-righteous indignation. There's a self-righteousness junkie of the right and one on the left, but we all know where we actually got our theme song for this generation. If you don't recognize this image, then you have deprived yourselves of one of the greatest movies of the 20th century called Network. But that image calls to mind one of the greatest scenes in the history of cinema in which Peter Finch asks us all to get up now, get up, go to the window, lean our heads out the window and yell, all the old farts are in front. I'm as mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. It is the anthem of the baby boomers and it felt so good. And that should have been a clue. And I've given talks at the National Institute on Drug Addiction and other places about a paper that I came out with showing that self-righteous indignation is the worst drug high, the worst addiction in our civilization, and it is destroying America as we speak. Especially, however, the fact that in the last year, more fantastic scientific discoveries have been made in space alone than at any time since the 1970s. And yet nobody sticks their heads out the window and yells, I'm as proud as hell. We're a nation and a people who do crap like this. But you're the kind who would. Okay, Werner Vinge, I mentioned him. He wrote Rainbow's End. If you're going to read a novel about augmented reality, read his, not my silly thing. But in any event, well, I don't have time to get into this, but the fact is that competition and cooperation are part of the same thing. Our brain cells compete with each other to make brains. Animals compete with each other, but they make ecosystems. In our arenas of democracy, politics, and all these others, we compete with each other and we make this fantastic diamond-shaped social structure, and Adam Smith talked about it. I won't talk about the dilemma of AI, even though I know what to say to AI to make them treat us well. And I think that it would work. So, will we rebuild the village? Will it be a village that leads to a decent and good civilization? Well, we have to believe in each other. And with that, I think I have 2 minutes left, and I'm going to open it up for questions. I think they told me I can have actually a full question period, even if I took up all 30 minutes, and I think I did. So, thank you very much. I hope at least you felt that there was a range of ideas.
Okay, question period.
David, thanks for your great talk. And my question is, what do you think about Steve's proclamation that augmented reality will die?
Augmented reality will die.
That's what he said.
Well, so it'll be replaced by other things, and it all depends on how narrowly you define augmented reality. It's a little hard to envision a time in human history when we put down a technology that would enhance those things that I spoke of. How much you can see, how much you can know, what you can pay attention to, and how much you can reach. We've not yet turned down any. And the Grouches have always said, this will be too much. We didn't evolve to be able to handle this tsunami, this fire hose. Or God didn't make us able to do that. Every single time, it's been proved wrong over the long term. So, will we wander around seeing overlays on things? I wanted to mention Minority Report. Now, you seem to be doing augmented reality, but you're not, actually. Tom Cruise is walking around through this city of the future, and adverts are bombarding him, and it's all push. Augmented reality inherently is pull. But the question is, will the powers that be pyramidal and consolidated enough so that your augmented reality apps have to let them in? Right now, we're in a very bad era online in which the apps that we have to let in the adverts. Now, there's a way around this, and that is micropayments. If we could develop a really good micropayment system, then journalism would no longer rely on advertising as much. I'm astonished that advertising has pulled the weight for the internet as long as it has. It's an extremely delicate and stupid model for money flow through this important system. And it's meant that we have had push be part of our system that we've taken for granted, push advertising. And advertising should be 100% pull. It should be 100%, I'm looking for this sort of thing, I will deign to listen to your come on. And that's what AR is inherently capable of doing. But it didn't make for a dramatic dystopian, worry fest like Minority Report. By the way, I respect Spielberg very much. I hope I answered your question. Someone else? Yeah.
Do you think AR will make people lazier and immoral?
Oh, everything makes everybody lazier. But laziness is one of the drivers of invention. I spoke of the addiction of self-righteous indignation. That's the worst. But I have a teenage son, and I worry about the addictions of the games and all those sorts of things. And as we are challenged, as we move forward, there will be ever-increasing challenges. And a time may come when the computer overlords get access to our pleasure centers directly, in which case we will simply be their automatons. And the whole robot thing will flip, and we'll be their meat automatons because they'll control our pleasure centers. That may happen. Hey, I should write a story. But the point is that up till now, we have proved remarkably adaptable. We've proved remarkably able for, there's this recent, how many of you read that chimps are getting drunk? It was in all the news just recently. They're stealing wine from the trees and all that sort of thing. Well, The amazing thing is what happened 10,000 years ago when we invented beer. The amazing thing is not what large fraction of human beings, especially males, can be suckered into addictions. 25, 30%. The amazing thing is that 75% or so can say no. And that's what's actually amazing. And we're just going to have to see if we can design a system that keeps offering people the chance to say no to the bad and yes to the good, by their standards, by their eclectic, wide stance, diverse standards.
That's all the time we have for questions, unfortunately. But David, will you be here a little bit if people want to ask a question?
Yeah, I have to head out into the hall, though, because I have to get ready because
Okay.
I'm flying off to Portugal.
Okay, so if you run and chase him and ask questions while he's running out the door, you may catch him. But big round of applause for David Brin, everybody. Thank you so much.